The wind on the eastern shelf carried the smell of iron that dawn, the particular cold that precedes rain by exactly 2 hours. Jalle knew this the way he knew most things, precisely, quietly, without announcing that he knew it at all. He stood alone at the lip of Kamidera Island's outermost cliff, where the stone shelf jutted 30 meters over open sky, his dark coat pressed flat against his body by the rising wind. Below him, the underside of the clouds churned gray-green with the sickness of a low-pressure system climbing fast from the south. He crouched, pressed 2 fingers to the cold, pale stone, and felt the vibration of the approaching pressure front through the rock itself. 2 hours, he thought, in the flat interior voice he used to keep his own life at arm's length. Maybe less, if the eastern current was running. The fishing boats from Torvald Cove had launched at third bell. They didn't know yet. The salt-drying platforms on the lower shelf would flood if the drainage channels were blocked, which they were because he had counted 11 stopped grates on Tuesday and said nothing to anyone. It was never his business to count things. He straightened, glanced at the compass that caught no light, and looked toward the bruised seam of yellow-green where cloud met sky. The boats, he corrected himself privately. That was the only number that mattered now. He ran. Not the careful, anonymous walk he defaulted to, but a true run that made 3 elderly women outside the dyer's shop stop and stare, because people in Kamidera did not run unless something was already on fire. He rounded the harbor mouth and collided headlong with Tomo Asheveld, who was moving the opposite way at the same speed, and an armload of rope coils and a tin of emergency pitch went everywhere. "Ow! Who runs into someone?" "Oh, it's you, Jalle-san," Tomo blurted, indignant, then immediately brightening. "Are you also going to the boats?" "I've been going to the boats for 15 minutes, except Sora-san keeps redirecting me to carry things." "How many boats are out?" Jalle asked, his eyes already past the boy and toward the water. Tomo answered with the quickness of someone who'd been waiting to report. 7, 5 from Torvald, 2 from the South Cove. The Haruki brothers took the wide beam out at second bell, their farthest. Sora-san sent the signal lantern twice, but the wind... As if to finish his sentence, a gust came through the harbor mouth so hard it bent the flame in every lantern in sight. One guttered out, then another rolled the darkness down the dock like a wave. Jalle's voice dropped to the stillness of a decision being made. "Where is Sora Tumachi?" He took the steps of the elevated signal platform 2 at a time. Sora stood with a long-handled mirror in both hands, her hair unbound and pulled sideways by the wind in a way she would never have allowed under ordinary circumstances, her expression the controlled fury of someone who had already tried every solution and watched each one fail. She did not look up. "The eastern mirror angle doesn't work in this cloud cover," she said, the voice of a surgeon mid-operation. "I've tried 4 configurations. The Haruki boat is too far to read lantern signal in this wind. I have a runner going to the drum tower, but that will take..." "You don't need them to read signal," Jalle said, calm and factual. "You need them to feel the change in water pressure and remember their training. Who captains the Haruki boat?" A pause. The wind filled it completely. "Marit Haruki," she said at last. 30 years on the water. Then she already knows. She felt the swell change 20 minutes ago. What you actually need is the channel mouth clear and the storm lines ready on the secondary dock, so she doesn't have to hold off the surge waiting for a berth. Who is on the secondary dock right now?" Sora lowered the mirror 6 inches, not all the way, but 6 inches. "No one," she admitted. "I sent everyone to the main dock. I'll go." There was nothing triumphant in it, only something underneath that he did not quite hide. He was already moving past her, and she watched him go without pushing the hair from her face, uncertain how to feel about being so efficiently useful too. On the rougher secondary dock, older and darker but sound, Jalle worked with brutal efficiency, pulling storm lines from a salt-crusted locker and testing their cleats. He had flagged down Ashin Verath, rumpled but awake, to handle the far side. The sky had gone the color of a bruise, and the first fat drops struck the planks in isolated heavy blows. Ashin caught a thrown line and wrapped it with the automatic competence of a man who had spent years doing this work before spending years pretending he never had. "I was eating breakfast," Ashin said. "You can finish it after." "All 7 coming in?" A half-beat passed, the first admission of uncertainty. 6 confirmed, the Haruki wide beam. Then the rain arrived all at once, the way weather in the archipelago moved, like a decision rather than a process. Within 4 seconds, they were soaked. Ocean swore. Jalle did not. He kept his hands on the lines. "She's been on that water 30 years, Ocean called over the noise. "I know," Jalle answered, not looking up. Neither of them said the rest, and that might not be enough. On the main dock, villagers hauled lines while children were herded back by shouting adults. Nuri Tumachi stood at the edge with her hands clasped, watching the channel with the patience she applied to all things. Tomo pulled a rope with braced feet, useful and yet positioned to be seen. He drifted toward Nuri without quite deciding to. "They'll come in," he said, the bravado slipping at the edges. "Maret Haruki has come through worse, right? My father says she came through the Meridian Gale 2 years before I was born, and—" "Tomo," Nuri said warmly, not looking away. He stopped. "Yeah. When you are frightened, it is enough to say so." Something moved in his face. The beginning of resolution. "I'm frightened," he whispered, surprised by his own honesty. "I know," she said simply, accepting it without ceremony. "So am I." Jalle saw it from the secondary dock before anyone else did. Through the spray, under sail taken down to almost nothing, the wide-beamed boat made agonizing headway against the tidal push, her hull yawing with each cross-swell. He made no cry. He made a calculation that took 2 seconds, then threw a coiled rope in a single fluid motion that dropped over the far cleat. "Ossian, secondary winch, full tension, hold it," he commanded, his voice carrying without its usual flinch. "Do not release until I say." "Aye." Ossian was already moving, responding to tone rather than rank. Jalle was in the water before the word finished. Not a dramatic dive, but a practical entry, surfacing at once, swimming with the economical strokes of a man who had done this many times and was not performing. The cold struck him head to foot, and he did not stop for it, the tethered rope trailing behind as he reached the struggling hull. An hour later, the village hall had become a shelter, its long tables crowded with blanket-wrapped survivors, soup ladled from enormous clay pots, children asleep in corners while the windows rattled. All 7 boats and all their crews were accounted for, and the fact hung over the room like a specific kind of grace. Jalle sat at the end of a bench near the back wall, his coat drying on a hook, a bowl of broth untouched in his hands. He was not shaking, but his stillness had the quality of something recently suppressed. Tomo dropped down beside him with his particular gift for the absence of ceremony, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You went in the water," Tomo said, tired and genuine. "The line needed someone on the boat end," Jalle offered, with the practiced lightness of deflection that did not quite land. "You knew exactly which rope. You knew which cleat. You knew the current angle." Tomo wasn't accusing, only observing, then, carefully curious, aiming the question outward for the first time. "Yalle-san, how many things do you know that you haven't told anyone you know?" The rain pressed against the shutters. Somewhere across the room, someone laughed briefly. Ayala's jaw worked on something that was not food. "More than I should have kept quiet," he said at last, with the weight of something partly set down. "Fewer than I thought I needed to." Tomo nodded and didn't push. That was new, and Jalle noticed it. In the dim alcove behind the supply shelves, Sora had retreated with a lamp and her ledger, though the ledger sat closed beside her and she looked at nothing, her hands in her lap. A woman who had stopped performing long enough to forget what the performance was for. Ossian found her by accident of route. He weighed retreating and did not. "The channel crew wants a report from the platform supervisor," he said, offering her the option of ignoring him. "Whenever you're ready. There's no urgency." "I sent everyone to the wrong dock," she said, flat and truthful, startled by her own flatness. He sat on a crate across from her, knowing it was the right move and making it without announcing that he knew. "You did," he said, precise rather than reassuring, for he had learned that false comfort was only slow cruelty. "And then you adapted in about 40 seconds, and the second dock was ready when it needed to be, because Jalle Orin told me to redirect. Because you heard useful information and acted on it immediately. That's not a flaw, Sora-san." Between them, the lamp burned steady, and for a while neither of them needed to say anything more.